Hey guys, it's Leah and welcome back to my YouTube channel. For today's video, I will be doing a match preview for the El Clasico that will be happening tomorrow. So let's get into it. El Clasico is always nerve-wracking. The history between Barcelona and Real Madrid is just so intense and so severe that anytime it comes to El Clasico, you literally do not know what to expect. Now, with that being said, let's first get into the two games that these teams have played prior to this El Clasico. For Barcelona, that would be against PSG, and for Real Madrid, that would be against Manchester City. Both of these games were in the Champions League to qualify for the semifinals. In Barcelona's case, they lost against PSG, meaning that they are eliminated from the Champions League. On the other hand, Real Madrid managed to beat Manchester City, meaning that they're still in the Champions League and heading to the semifinals. In Barcelona's case, as a Barca fan, that game was frustrating to watch. Barcelona had a 1-goal lead and they were playing at home and they just completely gave it away to PSG. And it's just, it was a hard game to watch. In that game, Araujo received a red card early on in the first half, meaning that Barcelona were down to 10 men and they had to play like that for 60 minutes, which is never easy. However, many people were really quick and to say that Araujo was at fault for everything in that game, and I completely disagree. I understand a red card is difficult for any team to manage. However, I feel like the team overall, a lot of the players were just disappointing to watch. And even though Barcelona managed to score a goal early on in the first half, they just weren't matching up to PSG's intensity and just were sloppy overall in that game from the very beginning, showing PSG too much of that ball to begin with. However, I will say, maybe without that red card, Barcelona would have been able to pick up their intensity more throughout the game, but I just didn't like the way that they started off that game with the intensity they had. You had individual mistakes from players like Araujo, as I mentioned, Cancelo, who gave away a penalty, and Koundé, and even more. And as soon as Araujo got that red card, the mentality of the team was completely gone. And I understand it's hard, to go with the mindset when you're down by a man, but they had the second half to kind of prepare better for, and they just didn't do that. And many people are frustrated with Araujo, so they're using him as a scapegoat. And I get the frustration. I really do. But I just feel like Barcelona fans just need somebody to blame. And I don't think that's the way you should go with it. They win as a team and they lose as a team. So if they lost, you blame the team altogether. You don't just blame one player. I would also like to mention that even though they were down to 10 men, they should have still been disciplined and concentrated in terms of what they did defensively. Take a look at Roma versus AC Milan. Roma received a red card very early on and were down to 10 men in that game. And yet still they were able to hold their own and keep their lead. Now, of course, you have, PSG players like Mbappe and Dembele, and that's really impossible to have 10 men when you have those players that have the pace and everything like that. I completely get it, but that just shows the discipline that Roma has, defensively, and how they're very compact and able to defend as a team. I will say, though, that Barcelona's strength has always been possessional play. They don't do as well when they don't have the ball on their feet. They're not a defensive team. So obviously, it's, that's just not their style of play. So it just doesn't work for Barcelona to defend for 60 minutes when they're down to 10 men. I will say that the only players that really impressed me and could keep their head up in the game against PSG were Lamine Yamal, who created that goal for Rafinha, who scored the goal. You have Kubarse, who's, young, 17 years old, but he won his duels. He did everything he needed to do. Some of his passes were off, but I think overall he did a pretty good job with all the pressure that was happening at that moment. I think Ter Stegen did pretty well, and we would have conceded more without him. Not much he could have done for any of the goals, to be honest. And I feel like Gundo also helped Barcelona in terms of controlling that midfield. Now let's get into Real Madrid versus Manchester City. They were playing away, so obviously they're already starting off with a disadvantage in a way. And I feel like you can make the argument, of course, that City were playing better football, more entertaining football. But at the end of the day, Real Madrid got the job done, and I think they just were a more disciplined team. Rodrigo scored a goal early on in the first half, and that allowed Real Madrid to take a step back and, defend and be more disciplined and concentrate. And I feel like that frustrated City a lot, because even though they were pressing up more and had, more of an attacking threat, Real Madrid was just so precise with everything they did defensively, and they deserve a round of applause for that because that is simply not easy to do, especially for like the long amount of time that they did it, of course. What they did defensively, you could tell also frustrated City because City wasn't clinical up front because sometimes they were sloppy and rushing their opportunities. And that's what frustration does. It makes you not think of the best possible solution to fix the problem. Now, Man City was still able to get a goal in, like in the second half, like towards the end with KDB's goal, and they had an opportunity to get back into the game, which they did. However, what Real Madrid did was still keep the same mentality. Even with that goal, they still played the same way, playing defensively, trying to catch City on the counterattacks, and that proved beneficial for them when they went into penalties, more confident than City because they're used to dealing with that pressure. And they ended up winning the game, so obviously it worked out for them. There are two Real Madrid players I did want to talk about, one of them being Rudiger. He did fantastic against City, timing his challenge as well, winning the duels he needed to do. Just really good defensively, showed his experience, and just very, disciplined as well. Now, the second player I did want to talk about is Lunin. Lunin has been fantastic for them this season. He made saves in the penalty shootout against City, made saves multiple times, during like the actual game itself, and he has been fantastic for them. He's not even their first choice goalkeeper, and I think he's just been wonderful, and for me personally, I think he's their best player this season. Now, with that being said, let's get into the two previous El Clasicos that have happened already this season, one of them being for the league back in October, and the other one being for the Super Cup final in January. For both of these El Clasicos, Barcelona did lose, so Barcelona definitely needs to win this upcoming El Clasico that's happening tomorrow. For the El Clasico back in October, that game ended 1-2 in Real Madrid's favor. Barcelona did have a lead, but they did end up bottling it in the second half, and that's simply unacceptable. Now, the way they performed in the first half of that game was beautiful football from them. Good intensity, they were very precise with their passes. They just were having good chemistry as a team, and their decision making was good as well, which allowed Gundogan to get a goal in for Barcelona. I feel like because they were quick with their passes and, precise, that kind of stretched out Real Madrid's defense, and that caused them to make mistakes, which obviously worked in Barcelona's favor. However, in the second half, Barcelona's intensity dropped, and that kind of upsets me because I feel like Barcelona have a tendency when they are in the lead to think that they've already won the game. Even if it's only by one goal, I feel like they forget that they're still not even towards the end of the game yet. And Bellingham was able to get a brace because of that, because as soon as they dropped their intensity, they started to get sloppy. And once they got sloppy, Real Madrid was able to pick up their intensity. And that in turn caused Barcelona to make, individual mistakes and just like, be very rash with their decision making, and that's something you can't do against a team like Real Madrid. Now, in the El Clasico that happened in January for the Super Cup final, that was just more frustrating to watch. Barcelona lost that game 4-1. Obviously, it went Real Madrid's way, and they, deserved that win because the way Barcelona was playing was just absolutely terrible. Starting with the defense, Barcelona played a high line for who knows what reason, because against a team like Real Madrid, you can't do that when they have players like Vinny, Rodrigo, Bellingham even, that are able to make those runs. The worst part about it is that the Barcelona players were just not aware in terms of like the spatial awareness around them, because they kept trying to say that Real Madrid's players were offside even when they were in their own half. So obviously that wouldn't be counted as an offside. Overall, that defense was stretched wide and their intensity was off. I feel like they were bullied off the ball way too much because Real Madrid had a better physicality. They were sloppy. They just weren't concentrating enough. And if that couldn't be worse, Barcelona were down to 10 men again in this game because Araujo did receive a red card. This one happened like the 71st minute, so at least they weren't down by 10 men for a long period of time as opposed to the PSG game, but it's still unacceptable. I feel like Araujo is very aggressive with the way he plays, which I do like, but I feel like sometimes he lacks that situational awareness at times. Also, Araujo was playing as a right back for that game, and I understand that that's what Xavi usually does to like deal with Vinny, and it has worked in the past, but I feel like Vinny definitely has found a way around it, which was bound to happen eventually. Also, I feel like Araujo playing as a right back just doesn't work anymore because he just doesn't look comfortable, and he doesn't make that run upwards at times when he has to play wide like that. Playing Koundé in that position would have made more sense, especially since Koundé was having difficulty dealing with Vinny or Rodrigo or whoever it was. I will say that in these two games, the two players that, I feel like were consistent in, the game in October and the game in January were João Felix and Gundogan. Gundogan in terms of controlling that midfield, creating opportunities as he's done multiple times this season. And then you have, of course, João Felix, who provided that creativity and energy for Barcelona that Barcelona definitely lacked. Now, going into this El Clasico, let's talk about some things that Barcelona have to do if they want to beat Real Madrid. Obviously, both teams are walking in with two completely different mindsets right now. Real Madrid coming off a high with winning and Barcelona coming off a low with losing. Now, I think that, takes their motivation to like a different level. I feel like, the loss may have motivated Barcelona to really win this game, but it also still could be a mental block for them. That being said, they have to forget what happened against PSG just for at least 90 minutes for this game because it already happened. It's in the past. You really can't change anything that happened. And they have to go into this game with such a high intensity. They also have to be more clinical up front. A big issue for Barcelona this season is that chances are being created, but they're simply not scoring them because their first touch is off or it keeps going over the bar or wide or whatever the case is. And that happened multiple times in the game in El Clasico in October. So they cannot be repeating that because against Real Madrid, that will bite them in the behind. They cannot afford individual mistakes again like they did against PSG or in the other El Clasicos this season. They have to be smart with what they do and they really have to concentrate and be disciplined. And they can't be easily frustrated by Real Madrid. Defensively, they have to be compact and defend as a team and they have to be aware of their space and surroundings and everything. Now, obviously, Barcelona face a big loss in this game because Gavi is out. He's been out since November, but Gavi was really important in that El Clasico back in October. I would say the best player on that field in terms of what he offered defensively in the attack. He helped bring up the energy for Barca, and it was just unfortunate that Barca lost after that amazing performance he had. That being said, let's get into my starting 11 for Barcelona for this game. Starting off, I have Ter Stegen at goal, Koundé as the right back, Araujo and Cubarsí as the two center backs, and Cancelo as the left back. That remains the same. I know many people are upset with Araujo, but he's still Barcelona's best defender, especially when it comes to dealing with players like Vinny. Now, for that midfield, I definitely say you have to play Gundogan. Christensen is back and he needs to play in that game because he provides defensive cover for Barcelona and he allows Gundogan and Frankie and Pedri to be more influential because they're not as afraid of moving upward because they trust Christensen to deal with any problem that comes his way. Now, the third midfielder to choose is difficult because it's between Frankie and Pedri, obviously. I definitely think that Pedri had a better game against PSG because Frankie just his passes were off. Defensively, he was off. He was just off in that game. And both players are still coming off of injuries. That being said, I would still start Frankie because even though I feel like Pedri makes an impact when he's 100%, that's 100% certain. I feel like sometimes Pedri does slow down the counterattack, whereas Frankie doesn't do that. So that's why I would just say put Frankie on and then Pedri could always come on as a substitute later on in the second half. Now, choosing the front three was difficult, and I feel like you could really go any way with this because I feel like all the attackers Barcelona have had this season have been inconsistent. So it's difficult to understand like which player will perform in El Clasico. That being said, the front three I'm sticking with is Lamine Yamal on the right because he did well against PSG up until he was sacrificed, so Barcelona could bring in another defender to Araujo's red card. But yeah, Lamine Yamal, created that opportunity for Rafinha. Now, for that left wing spot, I have Rafinha. He totally deserves it. He's been performing well. He's been scoring goals for Barcelona. He's been making the necessary runs, and he deserves, again, to be rewarded. As the striker, I have Lewandowski. I know his performance against PSG was not that great after the whole red card incident, but I do feel like he does open up the space for Rafinha to make those runs, and he has stepped up aside from that PSG game. However, if Lewandowski does not step up in that first half, then that's when you bring on either Vitor Roque or Margu because they're younger and they make more of those runs in the box. This won't be an easy match for Barcelona, especially since they are playing away, so that's even more difficult. And then you throw in how they're on a low right now, and then that just makes the situation worse, obviously. However, I still have a lot of faith in this team, and I still have hope and confidence in them, like, to turn the situation around, and in El Clasico, that's the perfect time to do it. In terms of my score prediction from this game, I really honestly wish I could tell you, but I simply don't know, because as much as I have a lot of trust for Barcelona, in this game they're going in as the underdogs. Everyone expects Real Madrid to win, and I just don't know how this game is going to look, considering, the way the mentality of the team is right now. Anyways, guys, that is the end of today's video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Be sure to also comment your thoughts on this game and your score prediction for this game as well in the comment section. As always, I will leave my X account, my TikTok account, and my Instagram account in my description box, so you could definitely go follow that. I especially recommend for you guys to follow my TikTok if you haven't yet, because I will be posting a match review on there after the game. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Bye, guys!